Hey everyone, SweetJohnnyCage here. Today I'd like to talk to you guys about my thoughts on Battle for Azeroth so far as an Alliance player. Now, keep in mind, I have not done really anything on the Horde side yet. I do plan to, and I'll make a follow-up video on my thoughts of the Horde side and of the complete story. But for the purposes of this video, I just want to talk to you guys about my experience as an Alliance player and as someone who isn't raiding on a regular schedule in this expansion. I just don't really have time with work. Unlike Legion, when I raided Mythic for, I guess, like the first 9 months of that expansion and really loved it. So this video is going to be a little interesting. I have a lot to talk about. I tried my best to kind of organize it in a bit of a script, just going over major points. I will put some timestamps in the description in case you want to hear my thoughts on specific topics as opposed to just listening to the whole thing, which I totally understand. I expect this video to be like between 30 and 40 minutes. We'll see how it turns out. So like I said, I'm not raiding on a regular schedule. I have done, I think, the first 4 or 5 bosses in Uldir, but I haven't actually finished it. Now just with the Pug. The guild I'm in is currently raiding Heroic and will eventually be moving into Mythic soon, but I'm not part of that team anymore. I just don't have time with work. So while I do want to talk about class gameplay for Paladins, which I'm maining again in this expansion, it really won't be that in-depth. And I'm sorry if you're looking to me for my overall opinion on the strength of Holy Paladins or anything like that. I don't really have answers for that. What I can do is I can speak to you as a Holy main and Retribution alt. I will say I think Holy's in a good place right now, at least from a Mythic Plus standpoint. The one raid that I did in Uldir, I felt fine. My gear could have been better itemized, and therefore, I probably would have felt a lot stronger. But I could hold my own. I can heal in situations where Paladins do excel, which is always single target healing. But I do feel like they have a bit of utility for AoE healing using the talent Beacon of Virtue. For those of you who don't know, Paladins work on a beacon system where they place the Beacon of Faith often on the tank, and then most heals that you cast on other party members, a portion of that is transferred over to the beacon target, usually the tank. Beacon of Virtue, however, means that you do not place a beacon on the tank or on any one specific target, for the duration of the dungeon or whatever. Instead, there's no beacon placed permanently on anybody, but what happens instead is during periods of high damage, rather sustained group damage, anytime you need to do some group healing, you cast it on one player, and then all the players around them receive healing based on all the heals you do in that group. So it's a really cool talent. I think it works very, very well in Mythic Plus, and it puts Paladins in a better place than they were in Legion for Mythic Plus and raid healing situations. That's really all I have to say on Holy Paladins. I wish they had better mobility. Right now, it's really just, Crusader's Charge or whatever the talent's called, where you get on the horse and you run around for a bit. That's really all we have. I sort of do miss my Resto Shaman, but, I knew I wasn't going to be raiding, and I much prefer the class fantasy of a Paladin, so I chose to level that first. I'll probably eventually go back to it, especially since it's my Herbalist, as well as my Alchemist, so I'll go back eventually, but I really do miss the mobility of a Resto Shaman while playing a Holy Paladin, and I wish they were more mobile. I will say, as a Retribution off-spec, I don't really like the spec right now, and I haven't actually liked it since the end of Wrath of the Lich King, believe it or not. I feel like they've sort of just really neutered this class. They have removed a lot of the class fantasy in Retribution. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're no longer fighting the undead, which is where the Paladins would excel in class fantasy. But I do find myself waiting for cooldowns a lot. And I know that that's because as a Holy main, I'm not stacking haste on my enchants and on the gear that I'm going for. So I get that, my cooldowns are going to be a little bit longer. But it's still not as fun just sitting there waiting. Typically, my rotation when farming quest mobs or just really doing anything, even if it's world PvP, is really just Judgment, Blade of Justice, Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict, and then I wait. And sometimes procs come up and I can cast other stuff quicker, but most of the time I'm just sitting there waiting for Blade of Justice or Crusader Strike or even Judgment to pop up. And of course, if I pop Avenging Wrath, then I can use Hammer of Wrath, which I'm really glad is back as an execute ability. But yeah, it's boring to play Ret as a holy main, and I'm sure other healer mains feel the same. But as a Resto Shaman in Legion with an enhancement off spec, I felt very powerful. There was really, it could have been because I was in Mythic raid gear, and it probably was, but I was never really waiting for cooldowns too long. I felt like I did a decent amount of damage. I felt like I had good mobility, with Ghost Wolf. But as a Ret main, or as a Ret off spec, it doesn't feel on par with where I was as enhancement. So I don't know what the solution is. I think taking things off the global cooldown will be a big help. It feels weird that Avenging Wrath is on the global cooldown, because it's your DPS cooldown. You know what I mean? Like, hitting it and then having to wait to use another ability is really strange. And I'm really hoping to see some GCD changes overall. Even as a healer, it can be a little frustrating. Like, I really wish Cleanse wasn't on the global cooldown. I wish some other abilities weren't either. But it is the way it is right now, and hopefully they make some changes. I understand why they put a lot of stuff back onto the global cooldown, and it was to prevent people from making crazy powerful macros, especially in arenas. Excuse me. So I get it. I just think that it's a little bit too strict right now, and can use some loosening up, if you will. So that's all I'm going to talk about for class gameplay in Battle for Azeroth, at least in this video. If I do start raiding hardcore again, then I'll probably make a video about where I think Holy Paladins are overall, because I probably will stay a Paladin through this expansion. I may level my Shaman just because it's my Herb and Alchemist, like I said, but for now I see myself just maining my Paladin throughout. Another quick topic I would like to touch on before getting into really the meat of what I want to talk about is World PvP and PvP in general. Battle for Azeroth encourages World PvP using War Mode. There are no longer PvP and PvE servers. Every server is both. So if you want to just quest and not be bothered by the opposing faction, you can turn off War Mode. However, if you turn War Mode on, you get bonuses from your world quests. It's usually just a 10% bonus on whatever the reward is. And then I think you may also get an XP bonus while leveling. But of course, the really cool thing is that everybody who has War Mode on wants to PvP, or at least they should. You still have people in general chat complaining about gang squads or whatever, but I think the World PvP system that they've implemented is actually really cool. After you kill a certain amount of people of the opposing faction in the world, you have a bounty placed on your head, and you appear on the world map. There's an icon, and you see it move around, so you can go hunt the bounties, and it's really, really sick. And of course, one of the other really cool things is that for the faction champions of Azeroth, you often have to go into the enemy faction's zones and do some world quests for that emissary. However, everybody knows that that's where you're going, so those are often really contentious battlegrounds, and you fight a lot, and it's awesome. That is one of the things that I have missed the most in World of Warcraft since Vanilla and Burning Crusade and Wrath, is World PvP. I don't think it's ever going to be on the level of Vanilla, but I think Battle for Azeroth comes pretty damn close, and War Mode really encourages World PvP, and War Mode really encourages World PvP, and I really dig it, and I almost always have it on. Something else that I'd like to touch on in World PvP is it has to do with the overall lore of this expansion. Right now I'm reading Before the Storm, or rather I'm actually listening to it in an audiobook because I just don't really have the time to read. But that book tells the story of what happened before Battle for Azeroth. It sets up the expansion, and it really clues you into the contention between Alliance and Horde, even though nothing's actually happening at that time. And I mean, we know from the intro to this expansion, the intro quest line in Capital City in Lordaeron, we are at war right now with each other's factions. And the upcoming raid in 8.1 just goes further into that. So I think War Mode, I think playing in War Mode offers a very different experience and a very different connection to this expansion. And I understand why they made it an option, but I feel like people who are playing with war mode off really aren't getting into the spirit of this expansion, and I think they're sort of selling themselves short. I understand some people don't want to deal with it. I understand some people hate world PvP. It's totally cool. I think giving people a choice is the right way to do it mechanically in-game. But I feel like people who have war mode on are getting a lot more out of this expansion than those without. So the next major topic, and this is really where the majority of this video is going to be dedicated to, is the world. And I'm going to cover a lot of different topics in this category, but I really sincerely believe that the world is not what it should be in game, and it's causing a lot of friction from players, and it's causing a lot of just sentiment. The overall sentiment of this expansion right now is not that great, and I'm going to cover why I think that is in this category. A major thing that I feel has happened in this expansion is that it was released too early. And I know a lot of people say that. I know a lot of people are saying that we're still in beta or alpha or whatever. And I find things like that a little bit inflammatory and a bit of an exaggeration. But I certainly feel like this expansion could have used a little bit more time in the oven. I do not pretend to be a game developer. I do not know what goes into developing games, let alone developing a game that's been around for 14 years this November. But there are things in this expansion when compared to Legion, you could sort of just question these decisions and really wonder why these things were released the way they were. It seems like for certain aspects of this game, or of this expansion rather, Blizzard was sort of arguing internally about which mechanics to implement and which to not, or which mechanics to change. And I think one of the best examples of this are the ferries in Tirigarde Sound. So for Horde players, the main zone for Alliance is Tirigarde Sound. This is where Tirigarde Keep is in Kul Tiras. This is where the Proudmoore family is. This is where the majority of the Alliance story takes place. In this zone, there are ferries, and you unlock these ferries within minutes of starting the Kul Tiras experience as an Alliance player. It is one of the very first things you do when running around Borealis, our city, and once you get a license to use these ferries, the entire ferry network is open to you. These ferries serve a very similar purpose to flight paths. It allows you to travel to specific spots in the zone along the waterways. Now, what I find very interesting is that even though we have this ferry system, which is new and interesting, we also have flight paths, and a few of the flight paths are right next to ferries. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the ferries don't go everywhere. They don't go near Freehold, which is a major questing hub, while leveling in Tirigarde Sound. But these ferries are largely pointless, because if you follow the breadcrumbs of the zone and you level along the route that they sort of plan out for you, you only use the ferry to go to the first area. You also use it to go to Drustvar originally, which is a different zone, but you don't use it in Stormsong Valley. So it's sort of like they implemented this ferry system and this ferry network and said, hey, these are islands, this is a seafaring nation, let's go ahead and create a ferry system. But then they said, oh wait, there's still mountains here, so what do we do? Okay, put in flight paths for the mountains. And then it seems like they said, just put flight paths wherever we would normally put them, and then they forgot about the ferry system. So it's just sort of like there's like an internal conflict between which system they want people to use, because by the time you unlock all the flight paths of the zone, you really never need to use the ferry again, and I'm willing to bet that most players forget about it. I know I did, and now I use it sort of out of principle, like, hey, this is here, let me use it anyway. But I can almost guarantee that barely anybody uses it because it's a little slow, and you're probably better off going to a flight path and using a goblin glider to get to the sea level where the world quest you're trying to do is, rather than just taking a ferry. Another example I thought of when thinking along these lines of Blizzard being in conflict with themselves and releasing things prematurely are the Outposts in Zandalar, or, if you're a Horde player, they will be the Outposts in Kul Tiras. What Outposts wound up being are just glorified flight paths, in my opinion. The way these work is you have to visit your faction's quartermaster. So for Alliance, it's 7th Legion. I'm not 100% sure what it is for Horde. I haven't done that experience just yet. But you have to visit the quartermaster, the vendor, look in their inventory for missions, for follower table missions that cost war resources. So on average, they'll cost the mission, to purchase the mission will cost you 100 war resources. To send followers on that mission costs 100 war resources. And then once they complete that mission, it's like 12 hours or 8 hours or something like that. Once they complete that mission, you get like an automatic quest to talk to Halphus Wormbane or whoever your Horde counterpart is. He tells you that, Alliance forces have, secured an outpost in Vol'dun or Nazmir or Zandalar, or Zuldazar, whatever that. Zuldazar, Zandalar, that's another thing. The names are whack. We've established an outpost, go see that it happened, or, go help them secure it. And then all you do is you talk to an NPC on the boat, select where you want to go on a menu, instead of on a map itself. You select on a menu, in a dialogue menu, which zone you want to go to. You get a loading screen. You just pop up in the zone, and then you go to that area, and then you just hand in the quest to an NPC, and then you've unlocked the flight path. That's all it is. And then, after you do that, you can go back to your mission table, spend another 100 war resources to upgrade it. But the upgrades are ridiculous. One outpost, I think it's in Zandalar, gives you... is it Zandalar? Yeah, in Zandalar for Alliance, you get a scrapper. This means nothing, because you're never in these zones long enough unless you're doing every world quest there to grind out 7th Legion rep. You're never going to need this. You don't need another scrapper. There's one in this city. That's the only time you ever need to use it. One other outpost, I think it's also in Zandalar, the upgrade brings in baby raptors that you can pet. One other in Zandalar spawns 2 NPCs there that bless you every time you land there, or every time you enter the outpost. The only useful one gives you a flight path near a dungeon in Zandalar. Other than that, and actually I think in Vol'dun as well, it gives you a flight path near a dungeon. Other than that, they're largely useless. It's great to have extra flight paths, but to call them outposts and give you upgrades for them that aren't really even upgrades, it just seems half-baked. I mean, just give us a flight path if you're going to give us a flight path. Or, give us something a little bit more. I don't know, have us fight for it. Have us do a mini quest line to open it. Give us a conflict to resolve to open the outpost, rather than just sending some followers on a mission and then going to that outpost, handing in the quest, and getting a flight path. It's really that simple. All you had, I don't know, it just seems I know I'm spending so much time on something so little, but this is really just one of a million examples of this expansion not being complete on release, or at least this section of 8.0, leading into 8.1 being a polished experience. It seems like a lot of this was just half-baked and just shipped. Hey, this is what we got. We set this weird deadline that really led up, there's a million reasons to think of why this expansion was released the date it was, but it seems like they set this deadline for themselves, or investors did, whatever the reason, and it really bit them in the ass. One of the good things about Outposts is that you actually only need to do it once. They are account-wide, so when you're leveling up an alt, you will have these flight paths available to you. You don't need to go on the missions or send followers on the missions to unlock them. They're already there. So another thing are island expeditions. And a lot of people have a lot of comments on this. Truth be told, since I am not necessarily, I'm not really raiding, so I'm not really concerned with the Azerite system. There are a million videos out there that are going to give you an opinion on Azerite. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I know from people in my guild that island expeditions are a major way to grind out Azerite, or Azerite power, I should say. It's supposed to be the most efficient way. I think a developer might have said that. I'll try to find a citation for that. But I'm almost positive a developer said that it's supposed to be the most efficient way to grind Azerite. They're kind of boring, honestly. I mean, I did 5. You need to do 5 unique island expeditions. So there are, I think, like 7 or 8 different islands you can visit. 3 are unlocked in any 1 week, or 3 are available in any 1 week. So you need to visit 5 unique locations, and then that will unlock one of the order advancement tiers, and I'll talk about that next. After I did those 5, I never did them again. They just seem pointless. You know, I'm not trying to grind out Azerite power for my Heart of Azeroth, so I don't really have much incentive to do them. I think there are some mounts and pets you can get from them as rare drops, but I don't see that as worth it. I really don't. And I'm somebody who's a mount collector. I plan on doing Waste of Time and making a guide for that, you know, pretty soon. But like doing this thing that's really difficult to even lose, you know, as like a scenario battleground sort of thing, it's just not worth it to me. Like I just mentioned, there are still advancements in this game in a similar vein to Order Hall advancements. It really seems like in Battle for Azeroth, the garrison table, or you know, the garrison system that they created in Warlords of Draenor, which I actually thought was pretty cool and liked a good deal, is going away. Legion was downgraded a good deal. There were not as many Order Hall missions to send people on, or garrison missions, whatever you want to call them. There weren't as many missions to send people on. They were still a good deal, but like they weren't ultra necessary. There was a lot of story ones, which I think was the correct way to do it. I think Legion had a wonderful Order Hall campaign for basically every single class. I thought the Paladin one was awesome, and using the table to send followers out on story missions like that, I think is a really good way to use it. And then towards the end of the expansion, it becomes very lucrative to get gold out of. But in Battle for Azeroth, all of my Order Hall missions have only ever been very small amounts of gold, very little Azerite power. I'm talking 150 to 280, I think it is. Like, I've never seen these 400 Azerite power missions that I've seen on Wowhead. Maybe that's because I don't raid, so it doesn't give them to me. I don't really know the stipulations and the unlocks, but it's very little for, you know, for war resources. The only useful ones to me are the reputation ones. There are Order Hall missions that give you reputation tokens. That's the only ones I ever do. Other than that, they're like completely useless. Legion did have Order Hall advancements where you would spend Order Hall resources to unlock certain things in your Order Hall. A lot of times these were just things like you recruit different types of followers that allow you to that give you an increased percent success rate on completing missions. Another example was allowing you to gain more Order Hall resources from some follow requests. Sorry, these terms are like mixed up in my head a little. But overall, you had something to work towards. Mainly equipping a second legendary. And say what you will about the legendary system, I won't get into that. But that was at least something to look forward to. You know, by the time you hit, not by the time you hit 110, but by the time you were 110 and had been 110 for a few weeks, chances are you had at least one legendary. Some people were very lucky and had 2, and then once they unlocked that final Order Hall advancement, or final at the time, they could equip that second one. It gave you a big power spike to look forward to. Another really useful advancement was the ability to get one of your raid seals for free. Not every class had that, I understand that, but the ones that did, it was incredibly useful. It seems like the war effort advancements in Battle for Azeroth are useless. And a lot of them are locked behind achievements that are a little difficult to get. One of which, the one that I'm on right now, is locked behind an achievement that has you kill 2 unique Warfront bosses. You can't get that for like another month. Like, I just don't get it. I really don't get it. You know, like, I don't get it. And I will talk about Warfronts in a few minutes, but these advancements just seemed like they either had an idea for what they wanted to do for the Order Hall advancements in Battle for Azeroth and either ran out of time, or, you know, something happened where they couldn't implement it all the way, or I'm willing to bet that it's more along the lines of they threw it in at the last minute because they didn't want to totally scrap it. And in all honesty, they should have just scrapped it. If this is what they were implementing, they should have just not done it, because the rewards are nothing. They have so little impact on the game. It's nothing to really look forward to. There's no power spike that comes from it as a character, or as a player rather. It's just pointless. It's pointless. The last piece of this topic I'd like to talk about are the followers. In Warlords of Draenor as well as Legion, each class and everybody in Warlords and then each class in Legion had some combat followers. I think they were called Guardians or something like that. But they were combat followers. They were Order Hall followers that you could literally bring into the world with you to help you on PvE content. They weren't incredibly powerful. They weren't going to decide the fight in PvP. They may help you take down, not a world boss, but like a world quest elite. They were useful and they were cool, you know, like as a paladin, I brought out Arathor the Redeemer, you know, son of Turalyon and Illyria. As a shaman, I was able to fight with Rhaegar Earthfury. It's just fun stuff, you know, like it was fun. It's so simple to say that, but it really was. It just added a fun element to questing out in the world and actually interacting with these NPCs that are often just quest givers and often don't really move around and just stand in the same location for years on end. Battle for Azeroth doesn't have them. For some reason, they were removed of all things. There are no combat allies. Further, the equipment that you can put on followers has largely been nerfed this time around. All they do now, first off, they're locked behind professions. So you either have to be that profession or buy them off the auction house. They're not incredibly expensive. But all they do is give you a chance to bring back some sort of crafting resource or crafting material back from a mission. So you can give them a mining pick or a glowing mining pick, gleaming, something like that. I'm a blacksmith, I should know this. You can give them a special kind of mining pick, equip them with that, and then maybe they'll bring back some ore. To me, in my personal experience, the rate at which you get resources back or crafting materials back from a mission with a follower who has that equipped is extremely low. So yeah, having this equipment on your followers is largely useless. And again, it's just another sort of system that they sort of released half-baked, and it probably should have just been removed entirely, and it wouldn't have been missed, really. I think from, you know, gold, you know, people who play this game to earn a lot of gold, which I try to be, but I'm not, you know, I think they would have missed it a good deal. And that's another thing is, you know, I've had a few gold missions that reward like 100 gold or 80 gold. Meanwhile, in Legion, they were rewarding like 2,000 if you include the bonus roll. Like, it's just an insane nerf that it's almost pointless. It really is. It's just pointless. Next topic is Warfronts. I actually really dig this system overall. I think it's a good idea. I just think the implementation has not been great. To give you a brief explanation, Warfronts are, for now, in Arathi Highlands. And Arathi Highlands is a zone that was in the game since vanilla. It's where Arathi Basin, the battleground, is based. It has been updated in this expansion. And I think this is really cool. I like that they're updating the old world, or, you know, the two main continents, Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. They're beginning to update them. The world, those two continents in this iteration since Cataclysm. It has been a longer period of time between Cataclysm and now than it was in vanilla and Cataclysm. So we've actually had this version of the world longer than we had the vanilla version of the world. So it's about time they start updating these things, and I like the way that they're doing it. I like that they are creating these as, you know, kind of like worldwide battlegrounds. You know, not necessarily a battleground that you necessarily, well, I guess you do queue for it, really. It's just a little different than a battleground because you're fighting against NPCs as opposed to enemy players. But there's an actual, not necessarily lasting impact because it does cycle. But again, like, this is another example of like these weird systems that they're putting in that don't seem fully thought out. You know, this shouldn't be hard to explain to you. Like, a system like this should not be hard to explain to you, but it is. Think of it like Wintergrasp, or even Tol Barad from Cataclysm, or Wintergrasp from Wrath of the Lich King. Those two zones were under constant contention. There would be a battleground of sorts between Alliance and Horde on each server, and then whoever won that battleground would control it for a few days. And then inside those zones was a raid that would reward like a current raid level item of gear or piece of gear. The bosses were never that difficult. It's basically what world bosses are now. Those were in specific zones, and whoever controlled the zone was able to fight that boss. So Warfronts are similar, very similar actually, except for the length of time it takes you to get control of that zone, and it just cycles on a timer. When you control the zone, there are quests that you can do, and these quests involve going to kill level 120 elite quest mobs, you know, killing, you know, groups of other quest mobs in different sections of Arathi Highlands, and then you turn those in, you get 7th Legion rep for it, and then you could do those once per control period. After a while of controlling it, the enemy faction, or while you're controlling it rather, the enemy faction can contribute resources to their war effort. These are things like fish, food, gems, ore, skin, crafting materials. As they continue to contribute, they fill up a meter, sort of like how it was for the Silithus war effort to unlock Encourage. And once they fill up that meter, it usually takes about a week, then they can fight for it. They can fight for control of that zone. However, they're not really fighting for control. They're just doing a battleground against AI. The battleground itself is really cool. It is very reminiscent to Warcraft 1, 2, and 3 in the sense that you spawn at your base, you have to go out into the world, or go out into that zone in Arathi Highlands, gain control of certain areas like a lumber mill or a mine, and you do that by going and killing an NPC there, or a horde NPC, and then you gather resources. You contribute those resources to build buildings in your base, and then those buildings will spawn siege engines, or they will spawn more peons, or peons will gather faster, just like an RTS game, just like Warcraft. So you're essentially an active hero unit in Warcraft. It's pretty sick. It's a really neat concept. And there are really cool things in this little battleground. For instance, you could sort of become God for 5 minutes if you randomly loot an item and then bring it back to the altar in your base. You know, sort of like a relic in Age of Empires. Like you get special powers because of it. Although I'm not really sure if you get special powers from a relic or a wonder in Age of Empires, I should say. But anyway, you know, you basically become like a walking bloodlust. You have a buff, and then everybody around you gets a buff, and it's very useful to use on the end boss. But once you kill that boss, it's over. You can queue up as many times as you like and farm out item level 340 gear. It's a pretty cool transmog set. After a while of the enemy faction contributing resources, they gain control, and then it's your turn to contribute resources. That's a cool system. I like it. I think it's great. I think that the war effort for Encourage was the coolest thing in the game. Blizzard agrees. Like, they know it was a really cool thing. They have just stated that they can't do it again because servers can't handle that many people in a zone. I understand that. It was a terrible experience the day that the gate was opened. It was fun because it's cool to see servers crash and like so many people in one zone. There's a certain joy you get from that. But as a player who's like trying to get into the raid, it sucked. So I guess what I'm trying to say is war efforts are a cool idea. I think the implementation is almost there. I would really like to see a shortened contribution period, a shortened control period. Right now it takes like 3 weeks to fully cycle, and that's a bad experience, especially when you're gating your Warfront or your war effort, whatever it is, order hall advancement behind this Warfront. I mean, it just seems like another thing that they're like, oh, this is a great idea. We didn't have time to complete it, but do it anyway. All right, so the final thing, the final major thing, I should say, that I want to talk about are the leveling zones. Many of you know that I am a lore hound. I really love the story of Warcraft. That's why I read and now listen to the audiobooks. Like, I really love this world. I think over the past 20 odd years, Blizzard has built a world that is fun to be in. You know, in Warcraft and World of Warcraft, I think the storylines are largely pretty good. I think the characters in Battle for Azeroth, Anduin Wrynn, Jaina Proudmoore, Sylvanas, Nathanos Blightcaller, Bane Bloodhoof, you know, like all these major players are great. I think they're good characters. I wish we knew Sylvanas' motivation, and I'll talk about that too, but like, I think this is a good world, and I enjoy being in it, and I have always enjoyed being in it, aside from Warlords of Draenor, I guess. But coming from Legion, and the Legion leveling experience, into Battle for Azeroth, it is a huge step down. And I don't say that lightly. I would actually put this under Warlords of Draenor, like if I were to rank it. Just this story leveling experience alone. There's a lot wrong with it, and again, it seems like they had ideas that they just didn't flesh out. So, as an Alliance player, again, as an Alliance player, I'm not sure how it is on the Horde, but we have 3 zones in Kul Tiras. We have Tirigarde Sound, we have Drustvar, and we have Stormsong Valley. The overall stories of these zones are not really connected that well. So, in Legion, we had 5 zones. We had Azuna, we had Val Shara, we had High Mountain, we had Stormheim, and we had Suramar. There was a very clear storyline that connected all of these zones. And even inside the zones themselves, the stories that played out had impact. In Azuna, we helped Ferrandis, or even in the very beginning, we helped the Illidari establish their foothold as they're fighting the Legion on the beach. And then we eventually met Ferrandis and helped him convince his people that, you know, he wasn't a terrible person and that he stood up to Queen Ajara even though she murdered everybody. In Val Shara, we tried to fight the Emerald Nightmare. You know, we saw Ysera die. Like, we saw her get corrupted and die. And then, you know, Malfurion was kidnapped, and I don't like Tyrande as a character. I think she hasn't been written well the past few years. But, you know, Xavius, who was a major character in Warcraft lore. He created the Emerald Nightmare. He created the Satyr. He captures Malfurion, you know, and then we have to ride with Tyrande and rescue him from Darkheart Thicket, and then fight Xavius in Emerald Nightmare. We set up the raid perfectly. In High Mountain, we had to unite the Tauren tribes, and just like it was so good. It's one of my favorite zones ever, is bringing all those Tauren tribes back together and, you know, just uniting them against Dargul and, you know, getting the hammer. Like, it was a great zone. In Stormheim, we learned about the Valor Jar and the Valkyr, and there's even an Alliance versus Horde, Gengramian versus Sylvanas Windrunner aspect there. I don't think it played out very well in the end, but it was just fun to play through. Suramar, to me, is one of the best questing experiences in the history of World of Warcraft. I think that zone was set up perfectly. I think it played out perfectly. I loved the way it fed into the raid quest line between Emerald Nightmare and the Nighthold. I am, like, upset that Tirigarde ruined our relationship with the Nightborn. I really was expecting the Alliance to have the Nightborn as an allied race. And it's like one of the few reasons I want to play Horde is because I want to be a Nightborn. Like, I just love that race so much. I love their story. Each major story point, meaning the raids, fed into the next one. You know, for the Balance of Power quest line, as part of the Emerald Nightmare, you know, we cleanse Val'sharah of the Nightmare for the most part. And, you know, we restore the Emerald Dream. And we actually, for the first time in-game, really get a good look at the Emerald Dream. At least it's just a tiny little area. And then that Balance of Power questline, after we get the Corrupted Essences, feeds into the Nighthold directly, as did the Liberation of Suramar City. That fed directly into the Nighthold raid. We retook Suramar as a zone. You know, we helped Thalyssra really reestablish the race and get them off of ancient mana and like restore them, very similar to the Blood Elves. And that's why I understand they're with the Horde and they have a very similar story to the Blood Elves, but anyway. And then, you know, we kill Gul'dan on top of Nighthold, on top of the Spire, and then directly in front of us, you know, is Tomb of Sargeras, and during that Gul'dan fight, he's tearing a rift in the world to invite the Legion and create another portal for them for Sargeras to get through. And then we bring the pillar, we get the sixth pillar of creation, the Eye of Aman'Thul, and then we go into Tomb of Sargeras, we attempt to seal the rift, and then we wind up going to Argus, like we're bringing the fight to the Legion, and then we do the Burning Throne, like 3 brand new zones got unlocked. You know, like the world just kept building on itself and building on itself and building on itself, but it had a great foundation. And I'm not saying that Battle for Azeroth will not have a great story in the end. I'm not saying it won't be a great experience in the end, but coming from the home run that Legion was, from a story and leveling perspective, into what we have now, it's a huge downgrade. And I'll talk briefly about the leveling experience in Battle for Azeroth right now, because I understand I kind of went on like a synopsis of Legion, but I loved it so much. As an Alliance player, we have 3 zones: Drustvar, Tirigarde Sound, and Stormsong Valley. In Drustvar, we are fighting against the Drust, and the main enemy that we learn about eventually is Gorak Tul, the leader of the Drust. Gorak Tul winds up playing a bigger role than we realize originally, especially if you do Drustvar first or second. So we establish the Order of the Embers. You know, we help out the people there. We drive back the Drust. We reclaim some territory. We, you know, learn about the Waycrests, and we, you know, the Waycrest Manor is the dungeon there. And, you know, we build a connection with the main NPC there. In Stormsong Valley, we are attempting to find out why the Kultiran fleet is unable to find their way home. And we learn it's because that the Tide Sages have become corrupt by the forces of Queen Azshara and the Old Gods, likely N'Zoth. And at the end of Stormsong Valley, we go through Shrine of the Storm, or Shrine of Storms. And when we kill the final boss, which is very similar to the final boss of Ahn'kahet, at the end of it, we see a Kultiran ship in the distance, like in this cave, and the Tide Sage that we've been working with the whole time says, you know, the grip of Azshara has been released, the fog is beginning to lift, and the fleet will find their way home. And that's it. That's all we get out of it. There's no impact. In Tirigarde Sound, we do like the main story of the Alliance. We are trying to find out what happened to Jaina Proudmoore after she was taken prisoner in the beginning of the expansion, or the beginning of the Alliance experience. We do find out what happened to her, but it's not until we've completed all 3 zones that we can go get her. We do eventually find her, and it turns out that Lady Ashbane sent her away to an island off the coast of Stormsong Valley, and this is an island for exiles. This is basically how Tirigarde and the Kultirans deal with their exiles, or their prisoners that they want to exile. bring him to this island to never be heard from again. And it turns out that Gorak Tul, the Drust, that we, the Drust leader that we fight in Waycrest Manor in Drustvar, took Jaina to the Blighted Lands. And what a letdown this was, let me tell you. So we go to Drustvar, we find the entrance to the Blighted Lands, which is actually in an interesting place. It's in the tree where the main quest line of that zone ends. And it's also the end of Waycrest Manor, so it's like in this one spot that you keep revisiting for different reasons. So you find the doorway, you do some quests to open the doorway, you go through the doorway, and to me I was thinking, oh great, like a cool little zone that I get to play in. No, it's just a fuzzy Drustvar. That's it. That's it. It's a fuzzy Drustvar. The way they made the Blighted Lands sound, it was like this hellscape that no one should be in, like a nightmare. And it's just a fuzzy Drustvar. That's it. We eventually do find Jaina with the help of Catherine Proudmoore, who has now realized her mistake. We do find Jaina, and I won't spoil it, but it's a great cinematic. If you're a Horde player and you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. It has some great story pieces. And then we unlock the first mythic dungeon, the first mythic only dungeon for Alliance, which is Siege of Borealis. Siege of Borealis is really interesting. I'm all for dungeons and raids in cities. I think it's a really cool concept. But the interesting thing is that Jaina comes back to the city, and then Lady Ashvane and her pirate fleet are beginning their siege on the city. And that starts through a cutscene, right? You see them coming. You enter the portal, which is in the city, and then after it loads, the city is now on fire. Like, the siege is well underway. And the city is beginning to be razed. Everything is on fire. The air is smoke and ash. So eventually you fight your way through. You kill the last boss, which is actually a fun boss. I do like the dungeon a lot. You get the final cutscene of the expansion, of 8.0, I should say. And that is Catherine Proudmoore giving the Kultiran necklace, whatever it is, to Jaina. And, she says, you were always meant to have this. And then Jaina starts singing that awesome song that she sings. And then the Kultiran fleet, like the emblem necklace thing, acts as a beacon, like a lighthouse, and summons the fleet back home. And then the pirate force is overrun, dungeon's over. You exit the dungeon, and the city is completely unchanged. Like, it's almost like it never happened at all. Nothing happened. The only thing is that between the time that you get the quest and you complete the quest in the dungeon, like you get the quest out in the city, you do the dungeon, you complete the quest, there's a couple pirate ships in the harbor. That's it. And then you enter the dungeon, the city is burning to the ground, and then you leave, and it's like it never happened. It's such a strange implementation, and I think they really botched it. Like, it's a cool dungeon, the bosses are cool, it's a cool experience, but in the world, it's just not great. It's not great. Leveling as an Alliance player was less fun than it was in Legion. I think the world building needs a lot of work. I think I spent the most time on this section, and I had thought that was going to happen, but so far, I think Battle for Azeroth is in a really weird place. It feels like they had a lot of great ideas, but did not implement them the way they wanted to. They have a lot to fix. I will say, in recent weeks, Blizzard has been very communicative about the Azerite armor issue, as well as where professions are, and they have acknowledged the issues. They say they're working on them. We'll see how that turns out. 8.1, patch 8.1 does seem promising. I love the idea of faction-specific raids. I think that's awesome. I also really like these mid-tier raids, like these 2 or 3 boss raids. I like seeing that, sort of like how we had Trial of Valor. Yeah, I think 8.1 is going to be really good. What I would really like to see, and I just don't see this happening, is these many quality of life improvements. We shouldn't be selecting what zone we want to go to on the enemy continent through a dialogue menu. We should be doing that on a map. We're on a boat. Give us a map. Professions need some help. The quest lines need to be tighter. the zones need to be connected better. Like, none of the storylines really come together at all until you complete all 3, and that could take you a while. And by the time you finish your 3rd zone, you've probably forgotten the story of the first one because it didn't have a big impact. I'm hoping it's better on the Horde side. I'm playing through it now. I just got to the capital city, and I'm picking my first zone. Yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you this. A month into this expansion, or 5 weeks into this expansion, I am not loving it nearly as much as I love Legion, and it's not just because I'm not raiding. You know, like, that's the other thing, too, is Alliance has no indication of what Uldir is at all. There is no quest that even tells us about it. None. By the time I finished... Oh, I didn't even talk about the war effort. Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my god, I can't believe it. The war campaign. I didn't even talk about the war campaign. Disappointing. In one word, very disappointing. You know, you gain rep with 7th Legion, you unlock more quests, cool. All the quests are a letdown. And the way it ends, you set charges on 3 ships on Zandalar, and then you have to blow one up early before it signals to the Horde that, like, you've done it, you know, that you're invading, and then it just ends. It just ends. No cutscene, no nothing, just a little in-game, like, little... I guess if you want to call things cinematics and cutscenes, you know, make the distinction, you get a little cutscene of a ship sort of blowing up in the distance and a bunch of characters waving and cheering. That's how the big war campaign ends. What a disappointment. 5 weeks into this expansion, I'm not loving it nearly as much as I did Legion. A lot of things are a letdown. I think a lot of things need a lot of improvement. I'm hoping that 8.1 brings those improvements. Like I said, a lot of quality of life improvements. I have a feeling it won't. I'm hopeful, but I have a feeling that Blizzard are just going to say, look, 8.0 is what it is. The intro experience of this expansion is what it is. We have to move forward. Everything else from here on out is going to be better. And I'm really, really hoping for that. So I think this is like an hour video at this point. If you've stuck with me the whole time, cool. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. You know, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Like, I'm always down to talk about this stuff. Like I said, I am going through the Horde experience now. I'll make another video, probably be a lot shorter, just talking about the Horde quest and the experience and war effort. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got for Battle for Azeroth so far. Yeah, I'm sure there's a million little things that I'm forgetting, but that's the overall thing. All right, guys. Like I said, if you have something to say, put it in the comments. I'm happy to talk about it. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me a whole lot trying to get back up to 1,000 subs. Gonna try to stream a bit more, gonna try to do videos on a more regular schedule, especially now that I'm playing WoW again. And there's, you know, a bunch of games coming out, so there will be more content on this channel pretty soon. If you'd like to, give me a follow on Twitter. I'm at SJCage. There's a link in the description. Talk to me on there anytime. Yeah, I think that's it finally. All right, guys. I'm SweetJohnnyCage. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.